Good evening and welcome. Tonight we'll be going over the brief history and geography of North Macedonia. And I'm using this map because the country recently changed its name to North Macedonia. So this is the only map I have that actually says North Macedonia. However, very sadly, I wouldn't normally use this map because the crease of the book cuts right through the country. That's so unfortunate, but oh well, just ignore that. So let's do geography and then history. And then normally after that, I would show you some pictures from a book or on my tablet, but my library just ordered a brand new book about North Macedonia. So whenever that book comes in, I will show you some wonderful pictures. That'll be at a much later date, I assume. Not tonight, unfortunately. So, let's do geography. North Macedonia is in, like, southeastern-ish Europe. It's a territory known as the Balkans. And as you can see, it is landlocked. And all the countries it borders really has a big importance to its history. The big border with Greece is down here. We have a border with Albania. This is the territory of Kosovo. Up here we have the border with Serbia. And here's the border with Bulgaria. You'll find out soon why all of those borders are so incredibly important. North Macedonia is a very mountainous country. It's a little one. It's got a bunch of different mountain chains going through it, though. The biggest one is over here on this side. It's known as the generic Alps in English. All of these mountain chains have very different names in each language, so I'm not quite sure which one to say. I don't know what they're called like in English, you know. So we'll just leave it at that. The highest point in North Macedonia is right here on the border with Albania. It's known as Mount Korab. It's part of that Shar Planina. I'm not sure if that's what it's called in North Macedonia, so I hesitate. You can see all the different mountain range names over on this side. It's very mountainous over here as well, but not as mountainous as over here. Also, in this border, we have Lake Ohrid, which is definitely the most beloved geographic feature in North Macedonia. It is an absolutely gorgeous lake. And the city of Ohrid right here is like a big tourist place to relax on the lake and look at the beautiful views. There are some other lakes here in North Macedonia. Lake Prespa is over here, also sharing a border with Albania, like Lake Ohrid. And over here is Lake Dorian, which it shares with Greece. And North Macedonia has lots of rivers cutting through all these mountains, creating some beautiful valleys and caves and things like that. The most important river would be the Vardar River. That runs down right through the middle of the country, slicing it almost in half. And the capital city of Skopje lies on the river there. So, in a nutshell, that's about it for geography. Very beautiful little country. But let's get into its history because it's a little convoluted. So, this area, as you can tell by being so close to Greece, and this is the Adriatic Sea over here, so Italy's right over there. That means we've got Turkey right over there and the Near East over there. This area was full of really affluent ancient cultures. I mean, Greece is right there, right? So the one that was up here in the borders of what is now North Macedonia was called the Kingdom of Peonia. They were a Thracian people, and they were, like I said, kind of part of that Thracian city-state. In the 6th century BCE, the Persians came from the Achaemenid Empire. Emperor Darius I came by and conquered. When they came back to try to take more of Greece, they failed epically, so they just totally withdrew from the whole area in 479 BCE. Then in 356 BCE, the area was conquered by Philip II of Macedon. So let's talk about that for a second, because you can see here, not sure if you can see, but this part of Greece here says Macedonia. So Macedon was a kingdom. Philip II was the king. And all the other major places in Greece that you know about, like Athens, Sparta, I just blinked on all the others. And you know what I'm talking about. Those were city-states. They were democracies. Very different from a kingdom. So Philip II conquered this territory. When he was assassinated, his son Alexander took over. And of course, Alexander the Great is a legend in history with his conquering that he did all throughout Europe and Asia. So Macedonia, or Macedon, was a Greek kingdom, right? It's it's kind of a point of contention nowadays because Greece and North Macedonia claim Alexander, really try to gatekeep him with his heritage, but Alexander was Greek from Macedon in the same way that I'm American from California, right? Same exact thing. He was Greek. He lived in a kingdom called Macedon. So that's really important because the people who called themselves Macedonians did not live here when Alexander was here. They came so much later in the 6th century CE, and they were a Slavic people, meaning that they came, all these are technically Slavic countries in a way. They were a Slavic people. So why do they call themselves Macedonians? It's because the Romans came in 146 BCE. It was absorbed into the Roman Empire, and they called this province Macedonia after the Kingdom of Macedon, which fell apart after Alexander unexpectedly died. And that's why we have a big Macedonia here, because of course these borders didn't exist back then. So like I said, a Slavic people, they came in about the 6th century CE, started to settle in the area here, and so did the Bulgar people. They came in and established the Bulgarian Empire, ruling over what is now North Macedonia. They had eventually converted to Christianity. They used a Cyrillic alphabet as opposed to Greek. So very different cultures from this Macedonia and this Macedonia. They're totally different cultures and nothing like what Alexander lived through. But anyway, shelve that for now. That'll come back later. The Byzantine Empire briefly came by and conquered in the 11th century. But the Bulgars went back and forth with them. Eventually the Byzantine Empire weakened, and the Serbians came in during the 14th century, claimed this land, and then the Ottomans came and claimed nearly all of the Serbian territory, a lot of it. So it became part of the Ottoman Empire for a long time. The Ottomans were very famously Muslim, and like I said, did I say that this area was highly Christian? Yeah, I said it, okay. So there are still mosques over here today. There's still old churches. It's a big eclectic mix. The Ottomans in some parts of their empire were kind of loose about religion, kind of let people kind of do their thing. In other parts, they weren't so much. But anyway, skip way ahead to the 19th century when independence movements started to form in the area. Serbia had got its independence from the Ottomans, so people here who refer to themselves as Macedonians wanted their own Macedonian country. There were a lot of different groups that formed. The biggest and most important one was known as the Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization, or IMRO, or just IMRO. They waged a couple of little uprisings, but they had a big one in 1903, which was very nearly successful until the Ottomans came in and just squashed them completely. It's still remembered to this day in North Macedonia, that event. So the 1910s come around and things get messy, right? The Balkan War started in 1912. The Ottoman influence basically collapsed in this area. The Serbs were the most powerful ones in the area at this time. Hey, Rooster. But the Bulgars really had the biggest sphere of influence in this territory, right? They kind of, conquered it before everyone else had. So the Serbs and Bulgars fought over control for this area, and then World War I happened. In 1915, during World War I, this area was invaded, and the Bulgars wound up taking over, and they sunk their claws into this country. This territory wasn't a country yet, and implemented Bulgarization, Bulgarian language, Bulgarian customs, erasing anything that was there before. But at the end of World War II, this area got sucked up into the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, which later became the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. And the Serbs sank their claws into the area. Rooster's really loud tonight. And implemented Serbianization, making it a Serbian culture. So you can imagine the people living here are like, we don't want any of this. We wanted our own country like years and years ago. What's going on? So IMRO was still around. They were still leading guerrilla independence movements during this time, and it was Yugoslavia. But then World War II happens. In 1941, the Axis powers invade, and they do what the Axis powers did, to put it the most relaxing way possible in an ASMR video. Only 2% of the Jewish population survived the occupation. Very devastating, of course. So, in other parts of the Balkans, a big communist movement was brewing, and the people here were pretty excited for it. So, once World War II ended, they decided to join with the communist movement and join Yugoslavia, which was led by Tito, Josip Broz Tito, the big freedom fighter who fought for the Serbs and all that during World War II. He took over. He was a pretty charismatic guy. The Macedonians were on board, and they joined in to the communist country of Yugoslavia. But then in the 1990s, that collapsed, as did a lot of other communist countries at this time. So Macedonia declared its independence on September 8th, 1991. Now, pretty much every other country that came out of Yugoslavia had a really rough time of independence. Some extremely horrific violent wars broke out. I've already covered Bosnia-Herzegovina on my channel. I've covered Croatia. I've covered Serbia. I think I've pretty much nearly got almost all of the Balkan countries at this point-ish. It's to be debated. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. But thankfully, North Macedonia withdrew very peacefully. I think there was just so much happening that they just kind of flew under the radar and did their own thing. So finally, the Macedonians had their own country, and they were like, so cool. We're going to use the traditional Macedonian flag, call ourselves Macedonia, blah, blah, blah. And the people down here that lived in Macedonian Greece were like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's our traditional flag, and we are called Macedonia. How can you call yourselves Macedonia? So, the country recanted on the flag. The flag they have today is their current one, sort of a more modified version of the ancient Macedonian flag. But they insisted on calling themselves Macedonian because they had been known as Macedonians since the time that their ancestors came into the area. So it's kind of weird, it would be like, say like if the US state of Texas was bordering the Mexican state that was also called Texas. Kind of weird, but they were kind of bigger fish to fry in this corner of Europe at that time. In 1999, a lot of Albanians living in the Kosovo region fled into Macedonia, fleeing the violence that was happening over there at the time. And a lot of Albanians were suddenly living in the country. And historically, the Macedonians and the Albanians over here kind of got along. once there was such a big influx of Albanians suddenly rushing into the country, there was a lot of ethnic tension. It really flared up in 2001 and again in 2012. Still a little contentious, but not as contentious as in Bulgaria or in Greece. Let's talk about that. So in 2006, they went kind of all in on the Macedonian identity. They put up a big statue of Alexander the Great in the capital city. They named their international airport Alexander the Great. So the Greeks are like, okay, whoa, like, you can't just appropriate one of our biggest heroes, right? And they're like, yes, we can. He was from Macedonia. We're Macedonians, hello, obviously. And that was a big back and forth, and it got pretty tense. So they had to sign an agreement called the Prespa Agreement. You can see like Prespa right there. And they basically agreed to just like not fight over it and try to come to some resolution. So eventually that's how the country became known as North Macedonia. It took a lot of talks. People here did not want to change the name, honestly. They had a referendum about it. It had like a 90% yes vote, but only 30% of the population showed up to vote. So, like, eventually that agreement led to the country being called North Macedonia to distinguish it from Macedonia here in Greece. But also, there were some tensions with Bulgaria, because the people here were very resentful about their history with Bulgaria. And Bulgaria was claiming that there was a lot of anti-Bulgarian sentiment happening in North Macedonia, which you can argue there was, but the people here were like incredibly offended about it. So they had to sign an agreement called the Friendship Agreement in 2017 to say that, like, we're not going to hate on you guys if you guys don't hate on us for it. The issue was that North Macedonia wanted to join NATO and the EU. Bulgaria was part of the EU. So part of the beginning agreements to join the EU is that all the other countries in the EU have to agree to it. So they did manage to join NATO in 2020. And they managed to start talks to joining the EU in 2018. It got serious in 2020 though, but Bulgaria put a stop to it and said that these people aren't following the friendship agreement. Why should we allow them into the EU? So that's basically where North Macedonia is today. Like I said, it's a very tense relationship. Not like tense like they're going to go to an actual war. Tense like politically. Like people are offended. So in a nutshell, that's it for North Macedonia. It's a very complicated history, like I said. And also, like I said, if sometime in the future, hopefully next month or so, I'll have a whole book about North Macedonia to flip through you guys so you can see the beautiful scenery here and see some of their culture and things like that. So we'll leave it there for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope that you found this video relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a very good